Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Oh, I'm back. Yeah, I missed one last week. Dang pear trees. We have Bradford pears in this region like crazy. Just useless. Well, they're not useless. I mean, they're ornamental pear trees mainly for their beautiful white flowers in the spring. Those beautiful white flowers give me horrible allergies. And last week I sounded about like Fred Sanford, so I opted not to do a show. They are actually useful. The fruits are edible, although, um, well, it's hard to get them ripe. Basically, they're by the time you would get a ripe one, those tiny little pears, they're about half rotten, so they're not that great. But also, even though they're tiny little pears, they have the same amount of arsenic in them as the seeds of a big pear. So if you were to eat a handful of them, you could actually get pretty sick. So people don't really use them. And now the wood is nice for carving. It's hard. It's very hard. Some of the first wood I tried to carve was pear wood. In its green form, it's usable, and when it's good and cured and dry, man, that stuff is like almost as hard as dogwood. So, but yeah, it's not a useless tree, but it's not the most useful tree. In fact, the state of North Carolina wants to basically eradicate them. They've asked people not to plant them anymore and to cut down any that they can. But it's too late. There are millions and millions of them, and well, they stink as well. They really smell bad in the spring. So anyway, but let's get into a more useful tree, and this is actually one that, wow, the mountains where I live, the entire timber industry was founded on this tree, and it was the chestnut. The American chestnuts were once, I mean, almost as big around as redwoods. I mean, they're just huge. They were. And then a blight nearly wiped them out in the last century or so. And according to legend, here in the Appalachian Mountains, the blight was not a mere coincidence. Chestnuts had been enjoyed as survival food in the mountains. The chestnut is really unique. It's really more like a potato than a nut. Full of starch. You roast them, and I mean, people literally survived off of chestnuts. And that's when the country was free and open. And by the early 1900s, people were starting to fence things off and put up no trespassing signs. And according to the local legend, the old timers said that because God had blessed the people with the chestnut tree, and the people had decided to not share it with others, be greedy about it, he wiped out the trees. I don't know, maybe. Um, you know what? I actually wouldn't doubt it, but the blight was really devastating. Whether it's a punishment from God for misusing his abundant and free gifts, or it was just a blight that was probably introduced from another country when they started shipping plants across the seas and such. Who knows? But it really wiped out the American chestnut. Every now and then you'll see a chestnut grow up just, maybe 10 feet tall, and then it just dies. The blight is still here. Fortunately, they have chestnuts in Europe and Asia, and they have hybridized specifically the Asian chestnut with the American chestnut, and it is blight resistant. So for the past 20 years or so, people have been reintroducing this hybridized American chestnut. The hope is that the native chestnut will further breed with this hybridized chestnut, or that this hybridized chestnut will become naturalized, and that we will once again have abundant chestnut trees. We're probably a century away from that, if it's even possible. Chestnut wood is gorgeous. I mean, so much of our furniture and such in early America came from chestnut. As I said, an absolute essential food. I mean, everybody knows Nat King Cole singing chestnuts roasting on an open fire. Uh, it was like synonymous with the Americas. It was just a beautiful tree, and the wormy chestnut, even after the trees were dead, was a huge industry here in the mountains. I'd say probably until about 1960. just going out and finding these dead worm-infested chestnut trees, which, as I said, were huge, and cutting them into planks and making beautiful furniture or paneling. There's much used for paneling, and I really hope it comes back. But we'll get into the medicinal use of this tree here in just a second. I mean, that is sort of the purpose of this show. But I'd really like to encourage you, if you have a little land, to get one of those hybrid chestnut trees and plant it. The more of us who do that, the faster things will turn around, if they're going to turn around. And really interesting, the American chestnut really that didn't die out is what we call the chinkapin. Now, the chinkapin's a much smaller tree. It's really more like a shrub, and it has a small chestnut that is edible. And I'm going to tell you a story, and y'all are going to think I'm crazy, okay? But this is the God's honest truth. A couple years ago, I spotted an old homestead on over 100 acres in South Carolina. Old cotton country, economically depressed. The land was like $1,000 an acre, so I mean, it's like big old antebellum house and land that cheap. I had to go check it out. Well, it was a bit of a drive. I was helping out my mother at the time, and I said, "You want to come along with me?" And yeah, she said, "Sure." She got in the car, put my dog Buddy in the back seat, and we drove down to an area in the old cotton country of South Carolina. And the farmhouse was actually in the center of about 200 acres of cotton fields. Now, I actually have a strong toxic reaction to cotton poison, so that really ruled out the property for me. What happened while I was there did not, surprisingly enough. I'm a little odd in that regard, but cotton poison gives me like flu-like symptoms. So I got out, I started walking around, I thought, I smell cotton poison. It smells musky. It kind of smells musky. But immediately I was like, yeah, I hate it because this is going to work, because this would be paradise. It's like exactly where I've wanted to live all my life. Started walking around this beautiful white house, and there were all the old landscaping that was still in place from the 1800s. There were rows of Sharon bushes, big magnolia trees, pecan trees, camellia bushes. Love that. Daffodils and irises were coming up. It was spring. There were roses and yuccas and crab apples and pears and several of those beautiful chinkapin trees. And I mean, they were really nice and really in good shape. And I mean, I was getting excited. And my mom and dad stay in the car with the dog, and suddenly she just yells out, "We have to go." I mean, adamant, right? And I'm just enjoying the flowers and the spring sunshine. And I mean, it really felt peaceful and welcoming. I mean, I would have just sat down and stayed for hours. And, I knew the agricultural chemicals weren't going to let me do it, but I was really trying to make it work. And so I went over and I asked her why, and she just like yells at me, "This place is haunted." Now, I'm not kidding. Okay, let me tell you, my mom has a master's degree in psychology. She's a very serious, intelligent, professional person, not given to superstition at all. But she says to me, "This place is haunted." She said, "I can hear two elderly sisters at the upstairs window talking, and they're talking about how they're excited to have guests for dinner." Now, this place had been sitting empty for like 50 years. I'm serious. Whoever owned it, the family had kept it up. Nothing structurally wrong with it. But, I mean, you could look at the old electrical wiring going into this house and know, they had never had internet in there. They had never had cable television. I mean, this place had been sitting empty for decades. And she could literally hear ghosts. And, I got in the car and said, because Buddy was freaking out, my dog. I mean, he was like freaked out. So something was definitely freaking the two of them out. And, I'm a pretty practical guy. I do believe in the supernatural. I have no doubt that there was something going on there. But whenever I think about chinkapins, I absolutely remember that beautiful plantation house. It was near Florence, South Carolina, somewhere between Florence and Dillon and like Laurinburg, North Carolina, the old cotton country. And I mean, I always say I'm like the only herbalist who doesn't see fairies or have two-way conversations with plants. But honestly, I did feel like, yeah, a welcome there. I felt like I was a guest at somebody's home. It was really odd, and I said, I mean, I told her as I drove away, I said, I don't doubt you at all, but it's a shame because those two old ladies must have been great gardeners. And, to have such a beautiful grounds, especially in a house that nobody's lived in for like 70 years, all I could figure is they were still taking care of it. So we probably would have got along just fine. And I know you all think I'm crazy, but I mean, the dog was freaked out. I mean, hair standing on end, like barking and snapping at everything. My mom was freaked out, and I'm just like, yeah, I'd like to sit down and have a have a glass of tea with these ladies. It just felt perfectly comfortable for me. But anyway, we'll talk about the medicinal properties of the tree. Like I said, aside from being a very nutritious, starchy nut that really is more like a potato in flavor, like a with a little sweetness, beautiful wood for carving, paneling, cabinets, furniture. It does have medicinal value. The American chestnut was used to soothe the lungs and as both an expectorant and astringent. This was taken as a tea made from the leaves. The Chinese chestnut has been used to settle the stomach and to treat diarrhea. Culpeper in 1600 England mentioned the astringency of the chestnut and its use against bleeding. Miss Grieve wrote of its folk use in treating fevers and spasmodic cough. But, centuries before that, ancient Greece, Dioscorides praised the astringency of the chestnut. So that's its main function. An Irish herbal says they are good for chest problems and for arresting the bowels. That means for congestion, coughs, and for diarrhea. A paste made from them is good against coughing and spitting of blood. Father Johann Kunzel, this is in the German tradition, wrote of chestnut. Higher up there was a tall, well, actually Kunzel was Swiss. This is in the Swiss tradition, so let me correct that, but it's actually German folk medicine, so that's the overarching term. Higher up there was a tall old chestnut tree with fruits covered in prickly pods, so he's talking about the fruits. The Laplander, that was his guest, I guess, what is that, Norwegian, was beside himself in surprise when the Dane opened up the shell and showed him the fruit. That's the nut. He said, this tree provides food for millions of people because these fruits are extremely nutritious. But why are there spikes all around, he asked. Well, without this protection, the birds and squirrels and insects would eat everything up. The Almighty Creator added this protective skin. When the fruit is ripe, it falls to the ground. The protective cover pops and we can collect it. In the south, that is in the south of Switzerland, I guess, they have even much taller trees. Near the fire-spitting mountain of Etna, there is a chestnut tree under which 200 riders and their horses have enough space. That's how massive chestnuts can actually become. I mean, imagine a tree big enough that 200 people on horseback could crowd under it, I guess, for shelter. I mean, these were, I mean, this is talking Switzerland, but in eastern North Carolina, every now and then you see in like Pisgah National Forest or something, a stump of an ancient chestnut, and it's like, holy cow. I mean, these things were huge. One tree was plenty of timber to build a whole house. I mean, without the chestnut, I don't know that much of America would have ever even been settled. It provided food, firewood, lumber, you name it, and even medicine. Let's see what we can do to bring it back. I mean, like I said, if you have a little garden space, if you have a little space in the corner of your yard or whatever, one of those hybrid chestnut trees. Let's see if we can get these things going. They, well, for survival, but for future generations, probably one of the best things you can ever do. My friend, herbalist from Austria, Jolanta Wittub, said, the southern part of Tirol, sorry. Tyrol is proud of the sweet chestnut, Castanea sativa. They have beautiful, delicious seeds, which one can use in so many ways. Every autumn there's a kind of gourmet festival called well, I don't speak Austrian, so I'm not even gonna try it. Let's see. No, I'm not gonna try it. It's T